Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster has removed erotica photos. Why? Why does an M-rated game need to remove the ability to gain XP from erotic pictures while rewarding violent ones? That's actually where my response to the choice begins and ends. No one cares that you can photograph a zombie's head being atomized by a shotgun shell. Not a single peep about how you can get PP from photographing a survivor being eaten alive while they audibly cry and scream for help. Not a single soul has ever verbally taken issue with letting Ross kill himself for a photo. But earning XP for cleavage, that is too morally degenerate for this game. Most of my annoyance about all this comes down to stuff around the decision. You know, online conversation. On one side, you have people crying censorship and how it makes the whole game woke. On the other, you have people making a moral stance that it was messed up and that it should have been removed, while having no issue with the headless corpses and/or advocating for Frank to be undressed more often. Jokers to the left of me, clowns to the right. So, the original idea of this video was to respond to a tweet from the user Frank by Daylight. I asked him for permission, which he granted, but we actually just ended up talking a lot instead. As a result, he has requested me to share a few statements. The first is that his original tweet was a knee-jerk reaction to a wave of knee-jerk reactions, and that he's a little embarrassed by some of the things he said. By extension, he wishes to revise his stance. This is censorship, and frankly pathetic at that, but it's not worth boycotting and potentially killing the franchise a second time over. So with that out of the way, what's this video actually about? Well, I hold the idea that erotica's removal is inexcusable and removing part of the game's identity, but in the few short days since this news broke, you've probably heard those talking points to death. So instead of just saying that, allow me to prove it. And I don't just mean by reminding you that the experience points in this series abbreviates to a euphemism for penis. First, here's what should have been done. Instead of removing it outright, make it truly optional. For Kent's mission, allow him to accept either erotica or an outtake image. You can even adjust his cutscene banter to address this, since they had to redo the voice acting anyway. When Kent is showing his 3 shots, have his second image be his scariest shot instead of his sexiest one. And after he's shown you all 3... Okay, here's the deal, Frankie. Anyone with a camera can achieve what I just showed you. That stuff was easy. You want to prove you're a professional? Huh? Go out there and find some levity in all this. You think you can handle that?
Yeah.
Okay, now that you know how Kent would sound if he was a Simpsons character, here's the second half. Give the player the option to restrict erotica photos. If they're gonna make all of the quality of life features completely optional, there's no reason to not do the same for what is apparently a controversial feature. In the options menu, allow the player to make erotica photos limited or unlimited. When set to limited, erotica shots can only be gotten in the security room under very precise circumstances, like Jesse during Medicine Run or Cheryl's request. And there you have it. This is a much better approach than just removing erotica outright. People who don't like it don't have to deal with it for any main game content, players who were never bothered by it don't have to lose it, and video game journalists can still talk about the moral requirements of not allowing erotic imagery of women before they go back to having sex with a bear in Baldur's Gate 3. Now for the other half, what they're missing out on. I have 2 examples of things that wouldn't work nearly as well, if not at all, without the erotica category. And no, I don't mean Cheryl's request, although that certainly comes to mind. No, these are 2 new ideas that could have been implemented in the remake. First, have Jessie react to the player taking pictures of her during Medicine Run. Specifically have her talk back to him. Here are the lines I would personally go with. In this case, having a character call the player out for a gameplay mechanic is simply really funny, and something that only really works in video games compared to other mediums, because of the interactive nature. After all, video games can reward or encourage audience behavior in a more direct manner than something like a book or movie could. The second idea involves the survivor Eliza. She's the woman in the red dress from the gun shop trio. Similar to Cheryl, she develops a hero's crush on Frank, although most people don't know this since it's placed in her rescue dialogue that most players have never seen. So, similar to Cheryl, let's give her a safe house request. But instead of offering herself for an erotic picture, she requests you to be an erotic site. Ooh. Frank will have to come back wearing something tight and revealing to satisfy Eliza. This can be any variation of the Ratman outfit from the various kids' stores that simply do not fit Frank properly, as well as the very tight-fitting tracksuits from the many, many sports stores. Frank's boxers will also do the trick should he find himself in them. Some of the unlockable outfits would also suffice. Arthur's boxers will catch your gaze, as will the Capcom-branded wrestling briefs. Finally, the ammo belt will also suffice, fitting, given that her mission in Chop Till You Drop unlocks the costume. After Frank arrives in something more presentable, Eliza ends up speechless as she stares. During this, she has a unique animation of her trying, and failing, to control herself as she gawks at Frank. This would serve as the single erotica photo opportunity of the game. Not the scantily clad blonde woman offering a photo shoot, but a fangirl getting turned on by the player. That is what you call a subversion. As it stands, this mission would be very out of place in Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster because of the lack of erotica pictures. It would at best come off as a weird tonal shift, and at worst come across as a double standard with the knowledge of erotica being removed. But with the pink photo markers, it becomes the game turning the tables on the player for a change, and it offers some personality to a character I'd wager half of you forget about as soon as you save. For those of you curious why I didn't give you any of the dialogue for Eliza's mission after I did Jesse's reactions, well, that's because you can go read them yourself if you're interested. I have a link to my Patreon down below, where you will find a PDF document of everything I personally would want from a Dead Rising 1 remake. It's something I've been working on in my free time for a couple years, well before DRDR was even announced. The document is available for free. You do not need to be a paid member to access it. The Patreon will be treated more like a tip jar than anything else. So, while I was making this video, and I was absolutely taking my sweet time with it, Capcom released their statement on why erotica was removed. I'm genuinely surprised they acknowledged it at all. They claim it wasn't for the changing cultural climate. I don't believe them. I have no hard evidence against them, I just don't personally believe them. But hey, if we're gonna suddenly talk about what's appropriate for a situation like Frank's, well...
My son's buried here. A mother should never have to bury a child. But he had that infection. The one those zombies out there had once. Couldn't afford the Zombrex back then. Broke our hearts to pieces. That's why I feel compassion for those things. They're all somebody's children, you know?
Perfect. 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 Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Come on!